Hello, I'm Chris of Target Test Prep. Today I have a fascinating topic that I want to discuss. It's the question, is the GRE getting harder? If a test is getting harder, does that mean we have to prep harder? Does that mean we're at a greater disadvantage than someone was only a few years ago? So again, a lot of questions will probably start swirling around in your head as soon as I ask that question, is the GRE getting harder? But in today's video, I want to really explore this question and take it apart to hopefully ease your mind, but also to give you a realistic appraisal of what's likely going on. So let's flash back in time here to 2011. At that point, the test underwent a major revision. Question types totally changed, the math section became harder, and to many people, it looked like a very different test. So in 2011, you could have definitely said, hey, the GRE is getting harder, it's different, and the math is harder. But what happened after 2011? And why is 2011 such an important date for us to answer this question right now? It's because that format that took root in 2011 is really the exact same format when it comes down to the question types. I'll get to it a little bit later, but in 2023, they reduced the test a little bit, meaning there are fewer questions, but question types are basically what you saw starting in 2011. So in 2011, what happened? Well, this new test debuted, and ostensibly it didn't get more difficult right away. But there was a sense that over time, over 3-4 years, the math section started to become even more difficult. The thinking went, if more people are prepping for this new test, they're getting better at the question types, there's more access to practice material, more access to test prep in general. Online test prep became really big during these years. It means that people are getting better at the test, so they have to make the questions more difficult. And so that was reflected in a lot of reports from GRE experts and tutors and many people who had taken the test multiple times. But something else also started to happen. Not just that the math questions and potentially the verbal questions were getting a little bit harder, but that students were actually becoming better. In fact, we can assume, or let's assume for a moment, that the test questions didn't become more difficult from 2011 to 2020. Something did happen though, and that is the percentiles shifted upwards. What do I mean by that? Well, in 2011 or so, if you had gotten 150 on the verbal section, you were in the top 47%. So right around the 50% mark. Hey, that makes sense. The GRE is based on a score from 130 to 170, 150's right in the middle. So 47% makes sense. In 2023, before they changed the test to include fewer questions, that number went from 47% to 39%. That means you could have gotten the exact same score, but done a lot worse in terms of percentile, basically scoring in the lower bracket versus scoring right in the middle. But if you think that's surprising, wait for this. In the quantitative section, if you had gotten 150 around the 2011-2012 mark, that would have corresponded to around a 40-41%, something around there on the quant section. You want to take a guess? What a 150 in the quant section would get you in 2023? Well, here you have it. Drum roll, it's actually 25 percentile. You are clearly squarely in that bottom quartile, or at least at the very top of that bottom quartile. But things have obviously changed, assuming the questions stayed the same. So the GRE might not have gotten harder then. The GRE might simply have become more competitive. And this is interesting and relevant because there are certain programs out there who say you must get a 50 percentile or a 70 percentile in quant or verbal. And that has made the test harder then, because it simply means, oh, before you could get 150, 3 in math, and now you have to get 163 in math. Those aren't exact numbers, but that's the idea. You suddenly, to keep that same percentile, have to jump up a significant amount. Now, going back to the idea, has the test gotten more difficult? My sense is the questions probably have gotten a little bit more difficult as there has been more supplementary material out there by the creators of the tests, and just in general, a lot of these test prep outfits, a lot of these test prep companies have created oodles, thousands of questions. Now, this is another topic, but that doesn't mean all those questions are good or at the level of the official test, but the idea there is there's just a lot more to prep with. And so the test makers probably or possibly also made the test harder to reflect that. But what we do again know for certain is those percentiles went up, which is quite impressive and quite amazing. So you might be wondering, well, if we know for sure that the percentiles went up and therefore it's become a much more competitive test, why is that the case? Is it that people are simply just smarter today? Is it that IQs or whatever that intelligence measure is just drifting up, and not even drifting, but just shot up, and everyone's a super brainiac these days? Well, I will leave the whole IQ narrative or story for somebody else in a different forum. I definitely can't speak to that specifically, but speaking to the GRE, what I think happened here was that people had a lot more access to quality material and quality preparation. Now, yes, I'm with Target Test Prep, and so you might think, okay, well, this guy, he just wants to say that Target Test Prep is great. But a lot of GRE providers, there's many of them out there, really weren't around or didn't even have that much of an online presence. But now that they have had since 2011, online learning has been able to reach people in remote parts of the world. You don't necessarily have to have a testing center or a prep center near you the way you might have 15, 20 years ago. That gave this, or I should say this greater access, gave people the ability to prep a lot more. Next thing is that people prepped a lot more. People began to take the test more seriously and dedicate more time to doing well. Now, that's not to say that test prep didn't exist before and people weren't prepping and prepping. Of course they were. But there has become more of a culture of you need to take time away from whatever it is you're doing and really double, triple down on studying for, in this case, the GRE, just so that score can make all of the difference. So you have more prep material out there, more test prep providers. People have more access to it because a lot of this has moved online, and people are simply prepping more because they feel or perceive that the stakes are higher, and this GRE test, their score is going to make or break them, or make the difference in their application, which that's actually in another video I talk about one of the myths. But for now, it's important to understand how it is that the GRE percentiles have moved up so much more to make this a competitive test. Now, what does this mean for you? Important. You're going to something that is even more competitive than you thought it is. I think a good takeaway here is when you take a official GRE practice test and you get a score back, don't always think that score is indicative of how the test is today. Those percentile rankings might be a little bit lower. I don't have the exact information on a specific test when those percentiles were baked in there, but if you're scoring at, say, the 79 percentile in quant, that doesn't mean that that's going to necessarily translate to 79 percentile on the actual test. Does this mean that you should study harder, prep even more? That is up to you. But the idea is to keep your expectations in line with the fact that percentiles seem to be trending upwards. You may end up getting a better score or a similar score to what you got on the GRE official practice exam, but percentile-wise, again, you can't know for sure. But there really isn't too much you can do beyond that, except for, of course, do what you're probably already doing, which is be diligent, be focused, use the best materials out there, learn from your mistakes, be better at really analyzing them. All of these essential, healthy test prep habits are what's going to help you test day. Walking in there just thinking, oh, the test is so much harder, everyone's good at it, and having a fatalistic attitude will not, of course, help you. But it's important to know that, again, percentiles are trending upwards, so that might influence where you land percentile-wise on the test. But again, do your best. And if somebody asks you, is the GRE getting harder? You can say, no, we're just getting smarter. And with that, I will see you next time. But don't forget to check out related videos in the description below. There's a link there. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I mentioned that there's this GRE myth-busting video where I talk about the GRE being the make it or break it. Check out that video. There's other ones like that. There's other myths in that video, all helpful stuff. And hopefully this was helpful too.